A terrifying shooting and carjacking in the east end of the city ends in an arrest. Toronto police saying the man in custody is the same suspect who shot at vehicles on the 401 earlier this week. Good afternoon. One victim was rushed to hospital with critical injuries after the rampage last night.
Today, we're learning more about the accused man's violent history. CTV's Janice Golding is live with the latest. Janice.
Hi, Sean. Yes, a 29-year-old man of no fixed address who was already wanted in connection with allegedly shooting at a number of vehicles on the 401 in Mississauga earlier this week has been arrested after a series of attempted carjackings here in the city's East End last night. Now, we first showed you some video yesterday in which you can see a man brandishing a weapon approaching vehicles along the 401 near Dixie in Mississauga. It's alleged he shot at more than 10 vehicles just after 5 a.m. And then last night, police came here to the Dundas and Carroll area to respond to carjacking reports. They say a man approached a car, stopped at a red light and tried to enter it, and then fired a gun, seriously injuring the driver. The suspect would end up approaching another 4 vehicles, discharging the gun at least one more time before successfully stealing a vehicle. And then he drove to a nearby parking lot and then tried to steal yet another vehicle when he produced a handgun. Now, police who had been alerted at this time spotted the man in this parking lot and gave chase. He did flee on foot. However, they did make an arrest. Officers say they also recovered a loaded handgun. Now, 29-year-old Troy LeDrew of no fixed address is charged with more than 25 offenses, including 2 counts of attempted murder, 6 counts of robbery with a firearm, 2 counts of discharging a firearm with the intent of endangering life, and failure to comply with probation, which is something that many spoke out against this morning.
Tragically, during one of these carjackings, an individual was shot and was rushed to hospital where they're currently receiving care. Much like yesterday, the suspect was seen pointing his firearm at multiple vehicles and shooting towards them. At approximately 7:40 p.m., police intercepted him at Lakeshore in Carlaw, where he abandoned his vehicle and fled on foot. Toronto police officers gave chase and located the individual and arrested him. He was in possession of a firearm.
He has a history of violence. He's currently on bail and probation. Not surprisingly, also has a firearm prohibition. So it's one of these things, again, where our members are so frustrated where we see people involved in violent offenses released from custody time and time again. And one of our officers actually was the victim of the incident on the 401 2 days ago. And he's reached out to me and taken the unprecedented step to say, let the public know even a highly decorated senior police officer can be a victim of a shooting. His car was hit with a round. Thank God he's okay.
That's ridiculous. These JPs and these judges, they have to start keeping people in jail. Who lets people out on bail after shooting up the streets? It's the most ridiculous thing. We need tough judges and tough JPs when it comes to crime. People are fed up with it.
Now, according to court documents that CTV News has obtained, LeDrew had already faced charges for violent robbery, fraud, and breach of probation. Reporting live, I'm Janice Golding. Now back to Sean.
Thank you, Janice. Well, there looks to be no end in sight at the Canada Post strike. The special mediator in negotiations has temporarily suspended discussions.
The longer this strike continues, the bigger the backlog of undelivered mail, and it's having an impact on several services here in the city. CTV's Beth McDonnell is live with more. Beth.
Yeah, Michelle, the City of Toronto says it's experiencing a number of delays as a result of the Canada Post strike. First up, parking permits. Right now, the city is unable to deliver parking permits. That means Toronto Police Parking Enforcement has granted a grace period until December 15th for those who already have permits and have prepaid or renewed online. The city says this group should still display their permit. New permit seekers and those who haven't renewed are encouraged to visit the permit parking office at 100 Queen Street West. There are other services. This includes hard copies of business licenses. That's being affected by the strike. Some committee of adjustment hearings have been canceled because property owners were not given notice within a reasonable time frame. People who purchased online garbage tags through Solid Waste Web may not receive their tags. Ontario Work checks in the mail will be delayed, and people are encouraged to sign up for direct deposit. Statutory planning and heritage notices may be delayed. Pet owners will likely experience a delay receiving pet license tags, but dangerous dog tags are being hand-delivered. Utility bills normally sent by mail will be held back until the strike resumes. Now, when it comes to parking permits, the city says it will continue to monitor this labor disruption and adjust the grace period as necessary. Reporting live, I'm Beth McDonnell. Michelle and Sean, back to you.
Thank you, Beth. We'll have more on the Canada Post strike a little later in the newscast with a closer look at the sticking points in the labor dispute and the wider impact on Canadians and businesses.
But first, let's take a live look at the city this Thursday afternoon, and definitely some sunshine. It's cool. It's November temps, and depending on where you live, perhaps you've seen some snow. Not in Toronto proper, seeing plenty of green there. Jessica Smith is here with a look at the current conditions. So downtown there by the water, there's no snow, but elsewhere they might be dealing with it.
Yeah, if you live in Halton, say kind of Georgetown, Acton, you probably saw a little flare activity last night. But anywhere kind of like you said, and then Toronto proper, you're not really looking at snow just yet, but it is knocking on the door. For now, we're holding on to cloud cover. We saw some kind of light mixing, more so a rain early on this morning, but that has pushed out and we're looking at some sunshine. We do have some snow squall watches and warnings in place from Owen Sound down towards Godridge, kind of tiptoeing in towards the Orangeville area and then up through Perry Sound and Elliott Lake. They could see 15 to 20 centimeters by the time we go from Friday in towards our Sunday. Here, completely different story. We are watching for a dusting at most as we head in towards just Sunday. But for now, holding on in those low single digits, and temperature-wise, it's a very seasonal day. The difference, though, is the wind. Right now, it's not too bad through the islands, through Pearson, but we're seeing those wind gusts pick up into the afternoon out of the northwest, and that's going to fire up that lake effect snow machine. Coming up, your full forecast right now. It's back over to Michelle.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Jess. Police have released video of a suspect vehicle in connection with a fatal hit and run. The brief video shows a white Cadillac Escalade turning left onto Kennedy Road from McNichol Avenue. Police say the driver of this vehicle struck a 71-year-old man on Thursday, November 21st, and left the scene. The man died in hospital on November 23rd. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. The Ford government is working to fast-track a bill which would close 10 safe consumption sites in this province.
Now those who work at those sites are outlining the potentially deadly impact the move would have. CTV's Natalie Johnson reports.
It is what 34-year-old Chris Kalajian describes as his morning ritual. Stopping into the Parkdale Queen West Community Health Center,
just coming in to use the site,
where he uses methamphetamine under the supervision of harm reduction workers.
These people are amazing. Like, they actually keep people alive.
We have 4 booths set up.
The staff here estimate that they have saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives in this small space, intervening in more than 700 overdoses in the last year alone.
Multiple times a day, absolutely. The way the toxic drug supply looks right now, like, it's extremely dangerous.
But the supervised consumption site is slated to close by the end of March, set to be banned by the province because it is within 200 meters of a school.
The government thinks that they're finding paraphernalia and stuff around like that, and people like sleeping in the streets. They're going to see it increase by like 20, and they close these down.
I believe a lot of my clients and the clients we see here will die.
The government now proposing to fast-track the bill for approval, pushing it through without public consultation, to the despair of the team here.
The door has really been summarily closed by not having feedback open for that evidence to be tabled.
I'm listening to the families who are dealing with open consumption in their communities.
The health minister today defending the plan, which involves launching homeless and addiction recovery treatment hubs in place of the consumption sites.
We are transitioning and actually providing more services so that people get a pathway out of addiction.
People can't go to treatment if they're dead. And, you know, that is one of our biggest concerns, is that people are going to be dying out in the streets.
Staff at the Parkdale Centre calling for consultation and compassion as the time ticks down.
It's never too late to right a wrong. And I think a wrong has been done, and that there is still an opportunity for the province to make right.
Natalie Johnson, CTV News.
Community leaders are joining city officials today for an interfaith summit on combating hate and anti-Semitism in Toronto. Councillors spoke to reporters before the meeting with more on why it was convened.
Anti-Semitism is not just a problem for the Jewish community, and it's not just a problem that they can face alone. All of us have to stand up shoulder to shoulder, and speak up loudly in our condemnation together. That's what today is all about, hearing from community, all communities, and sending a clear message that we need more leadership and action to stamp out hate in this city.
The Jewish community has been the most frequent target of hate crimes in Toronto for more than 5 consecutive years. This comes as the TTC's CEO says hate-motivated graffiti is a growing concern on the transit system.
TTC interim CEO Greg Percy outlined his concerns in a letter to the province to Police Chief Myron Demkew. Percy pointed to an increase in hateful graffiti on vehicles and infrastructure targeting the Jewish community. He said the added workload of removing it is diverting crews from scheduled maintenance, and police help is needed to address the issue and take preventative action.
In his letter to Chief Demkew, Percy wrote, in part, I recognize the complexities of addressing these incidents and seek any guidance you can provide regarding effective deterrence processes or available supports to mitigate this troubling trend. We cannot allow this behavior to continue. We've asked Toronto Police for comment. Their stats show the Jewish community is the most frequent target for hate crimes in the city, with an increase seen since October 7th of last year.
After criticizing the federal government following the emergency meeting last night to Trump's tariff threats, this morning Premier Ford seemed to be more optimistic.
CTV News Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris has more on what he said today.
Big smiles at a groundbreaking the morning after a frank discussion on the border following threats from incoming U.S. President Donald Trump to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods.
It was a positive conversation. We look forward to tightening up the border. All the premiers agree, the Prime Minister agrees, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
The Deputy Prime Minister says Ottawa found consensus with the country's premiers.
We agreed that we need to be smart, strong, and united in meeting this challenge.
Also agreeing to some degree Trump's border concerns are justified.
Illegal drugs, especially opioids, are a scourge for both of our countries, and that we need to continue to work hard to ensure our border is safe and secure.
Not a lot of detail right now on what changes may be ahead. Premier Ford had accused the federal government of being caught on its back foot. He says funding for the Mounties and border agents needs to be increased. Today, he's feeling optimistic.
We're all in this together as Team Canada, and we'll get this done.
Siobhan Morris, CTV News.
After the meeting, the Prime Minister posted on social media, I spoke with the premiers about Canada-U.S. trade and the border. Our focus, Canadian jobs, securing the border, and building on our strong partnership with the United States.
The Liberals' proposed two-month GST break is expected to pass in the House of Commons today. The NDP has said that they were the ones who suggested the tax holiday and that their MPs would support the legislation. The bill will eliminate federal taxes for 2 months on common items, including children's clothes, toys, restaurant meals, and prepackaged food at the grocery store. But the NDP isn't backing the Liberals' promise to send $250 next spring to those who made $150,000 or less. Jagmeet Singh's party says they want the rebate expanded to groups like seniors, recent graduates, and people with disabilities who aren't working. The Conservatives say they're opposed to the Prime Minister's plan.
He's desperate. He's lost control, but he's trying to hold on to power. And so he's come up with a irresponsible and inflationist $6 billion tax trick that he will take away right before raising the carbon tax on heat, housing, groceries, and gas in just a few months.
This bill is the first new legislation to be debated in the House since the end of September. Back then, the Liberals needed the NDP's votes to suspend debate on a Conservative motion that was calling for the government to release documents linked to allegations of misspent federal funds.
The province is also getting on board with Ottawa's plans for a temporary tax break. The Ford government says it will match the plan and remove the provincial sales tax on items not currently covered by existing rebates for the same period. The federal debate over a rebate check follows a pledge by the Progressive Conservatives to send a similar payment to Ontarians.
An Ontario man is facing extradition to the U.S. after being arrested as part of a data breach investigation.
The suspect is accused of participating in a massive hacking scheme targeting several large companies. CTV's Krista Simpson has more.
This past spring, a massive data breach at Snowflake, a company providing data storage.
One of the third parties that companies pay to manage their data on Snowflake was compromised, and then through them, the hackers got a bunch of usernames and in some cases passwords, and then they used those usernames and passwords to get into the main accounts of these bigger companies.
Some of those bigger companies that said they were affected by the attacks: AT&T, Live Nation and Ticketmaster, and Advance Auto Parts. And even though the full extent of the hack isn't known,
it is certainly one of the biggest cybersecurity breaches that we've had in history.
Now 2 people are facing charges, and while Snowflake and the other companies are not named in court documents, experts agree the details match the Snowflake hack. One of the accused was believed to be in Turkey. The other was found living in Kitchener's Stanley Park area. 25-year-old Connor Muka, also known as Alexander Muka, is facing charges related to conspiracy, computer fraud and abuse, extortion in relation to computer fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. The RCMP taking these surveillance photos at the Kitchener home ahead of his arrest. The indictment alleges that Muka and others devised and executed international computer hacking and wire fraud schemes to hack into at least 10 victim organizations' protected computer networks, steal sensitive information, threaten to leak the stolen data unless the victims paid ransoms, and offer to sell online and sell the stolen data. Going on to allege they successfully extorted about $2.5 million from at least 3 of the victims who paid the ransoms. They also posted offers to sell the stolen data for millions of dollars. One victim, described as a major telecommunications company in the U.S., who had about 50 billion customer call and text records stolen. Other victims are described as a major retailer in the States, a major entertainment company, and a major healthcare company. Documents prepared by the RCMP also outline the seriousness of the allegations, their concerns that Muka was a serious flight risk, and that he was continuing to hack and attempt to re-extort victims. They also raised concerns he was a danger to the public, to police, and to himself, quoting online messages he wrote, including, "I think I'd make a really good serial killer," threatening to attempt suicide by cop, and saying, "I need guns to kill Canadians." According to the Department of Justice Canada, Muka was arrested on October 30th and appeared in court later that day. He had another court appearance in November where he indicated he was still awaiting a decision on legal aid. He is scheduled to be back in court on Friday for an update. The case remains before the courts, and nothing has been proven at this time. Cybersecurity expert David Zhao says, while it appears the 2 alleged masterminds have been identified, there is still a long way to go in this case.
It's going to go through the court system. There's going to be a result for the individuals who are arrested. The case is not over. There are still other sort of criminals that are out there that have not been caught yet. We'll go after them. And I hope that the companies involved will sort of make changes to prevent these kinds of things in the future.
Krista Simpson, CTV News.
Donald Trump's claimed a win on stopping illegal immigration from the southern border after talking to Mexico's president last night. But that's only one interpretation of the conversation. Claudia Sheinbaum suggested Mexico is already doing its part and will not close its borders. The 2 spoke just days after Trump threatened to impose sweeping new tariffs on both Canada and Mexico. Trump says Sheinbaum agreed to stop migration through Mexico. But Sheinbaum indicated on social media she'd told Trump Mexico is already taking care of migrant caravans, calling it an excellent conversation.
Russia has conducted a massive attack against Ukraine's infrastructure today, leaving more than 1 million households without power. The coordinated assault unfolded over several hours with waves of drones and missiles flying across the length and breadth of Ukraine, making it Russia's second major aerial attack on Ukraine's power grid in less than 2 weeks, with amplified fears that the Kremlin aims to destroy the country's power generation capacity before winter. This comes as Russia says it's selecting targets in Ukraine that could include key government buildings in Kyiv in response to Ukrainian long-range strikes on Russian territory with the use of Western weapons. Vladimir Putin says Russia's new hypersonic missile, which was fired for the first time last week, is incapable of being intercepted, and claimed Russia's production of advanced missile systems outstrips that of NATO.
There are accusations today that both sides of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict have reached their ceasefire agreement, but for now, the fragile truce seems to be holding into its second day. Hezbollah has accused Israel of attacking people returning to their villages in southern Lebanon. The Israeli military says it fired on people trying to return to particular areas in southern Lebanon that would breach conditions of the ceasefire. The ceasefire took effect Wednesday, bringing hope of ending 14 months of fighting. At the same time, Israel is also stepping up strikes in central Gaza. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, Israeli airstrikes killed at least 17 people across the Gaza Strip this morning.
Returning to the impact of the ongoing Canada Post strike and mediation suspension, CTV's Scott Hurst is standing by with the latest. Scott, postal talks have stalled. Any word on government intervention?
Good afternoon, Sean. It appears that the government, that Ottawa, has no plans to step into the middle of this strike. And also, the two sides seem nowhere close to an agreement. This is the reality of where we are, really now 2 weeks into this postal strike, where a lot of people are being impacted. But right now, both sides appear to be pointing the finger at the other for causing the gridlock, as the Crown Corporation put it, blaming the union for talks grinding to a halt. Well, the union responded by calling out Canada Post for what it says are half-truths and outright deception. The union also saying Canada Post has been laying off striking employees. Canada Post confirming, saying the layoffs are temporary. But according to the Labour Minister, he said they alone, meaning the two sides, are responsible to find a solution to this deadlock. And speaking to reporters yesterday, McKinnon saying the government does not plan to force a result through binding arbitration, and that they've had the access to some of the best mediation services available. He did strike somewhat of a hopeful tone, maybe overly optimistic tone, saying potentially this pause could allow the parties to reassess their positions and maybe return to the bargaining table with renewed resolve. But Sean, 2 weeks into this, it doesn't appear that the sides are any closer to finding a collective agreement. And in the meantime, we are getting much closer to the all-important holiday shopping season for Canadian businesses, with Black Friday just around the corner, kicking off tomorrow.
So, Scott, what are the next steps here, and what are the main sticking points that are causing this deadlock?
Sean, the next steps ultimately will be continued talks at the bargaining table, and these main sticking points remain quite far apart. The union says it wants salaries brought in line with inflation, calling for better wages and better working conditions, amongst other things like increase in paid medical days, better benefits, and the union wants Canada Post to hire more full-time staff. Canada Post, in the meantime, is looking for more flexibility to its outdated mail-based delivery model to compete in the all-important parcel business, meaning parcel service 7 days a week. And that is where a sticking point between hiring more part-time versus hiring more full-time staff is really causing a lot of issue at the bargaining table. And so this is where we sit, as I mentioned, now 2 weeks into this, with little progress and still lots to figure out at the bargaining table. But now, as we've heard, negotiations have broken down, even with the help of a special mediator. And so ultimately the next step, Sean, will be to get back to the bargaining table with any meaningful change from either side so that they can get agreement at the bargaining table. And that is where the government wants it to happen. And at this time, the Labour Minister says there are no plans for the government to step in. So, as I said, as we get closer to the all-important busy holiday shopping season, it appears that this strike might grind on for some time.
Hopefully they do find some movement soon. Thank you very much, CTV's Scott Hurst. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Sean.
Well, rainy conditions for a big annual event in New York City, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Have a look at some of the floats. Colorful costumes and floats were met by onlookers, decked in ponchos, hoping to catch a glimpse of some familiar characters and of the stars and Broadway productions performing at this beloved annual holiday event. Jess, you're not going to rain on their parade.
Nothing can stop all the joy that happens with that parade. A little rain for them. There was a little for us early on this morning, but we are looking at a pretty decent, very standard fall day once again. We'll see a daytime high on the more seasonal side, so easy enough to get outside until you factor in the wind. Those winds out of the northwest are gusty and they are cool. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long-range forecast as we make our way in towards the end of the week and the final few days of November as December begins on Sunday. Your full forecast coming up.
Time now for your weather forecast, and at this hour it's looking a little bit gray. It's definitely cool. Nothing.
It's November.
It's the November
it's
vibe,
what you get. Let's ride it out. I'm sure there'll be better weather later on, but today's today.
Later on, you mean like in the new year?
Yeah.
Maybe. To be fair, we haven't really had much of a November, right? It's been so warm outside. Sure. I think I only busted up my winter coat like last week. We are seeing snow kind of trickling into the GTA, but the downtown core, the greater Toronto area, for the most part, staying relatively dry. But things are set to change as we head into the weekend. Weather is brought to you by the Presler Law Firm. Injury lawyers you don't pay unless they win. Now, a nice little shot of the Lakeview Park through Oshawa. Not a ton of sunshine, but you know what? It doesn't matter. The pets don't mind. A beautiful day to be outside if you're dressed appropriately, right? You want to put on a couple of layers because that northwesterly wind is fresh. It's that kind of wind that gets up your jacket and then your back gets cold and then you're just cold all day. The good news is as we head through the afternoon, at least it's a pretty seasonal one, all things considered. We're sitting at 6 right now here in the city, 4 through Windsor, 2 in Ottawa, anywhere kind of north of Sudbury, still on the cooler side. They've already experienced that kind of blast of wintry weather. Today we're sitting pretty much at that seasonal point right across the board. A little mixing taking place a little further east, but that's kind of falling more so as rain as we head into the afternoon as it warms up. And we're not looking at much in the way of accumulation. But we have seen snow through areas towards Halton Region and in towards Owen Sound, and that only increases as we head into the next couple of days. Tonight, dropping down to -1, so still hovering just above seasonal, and everybody's still just on the cusp of it getting really cold. But for now, we're sitting at a pretty seasonal point. We saw that system make its way out that was impacting us from before, but we are looking at some snow squall watches and warnings. Not for the GTA, but it is a busy time. People are starting to get that travel in. Some ski hills are opening this weekend, so just keep that in mind. Owen Sound down towards areas through Orangeville, up through Perry Sound, Elliott Lake. They are looking at the potential from Friday into Sunday up to 20 centimeters. Different story for the GTA. The snow likely to come as we head in towards the end of the weekend and a dusting at most. But really and truly, we were just holding on to a fairly cloudy day, a few peaks of sunshine here and there. And then we're looking at some lake effect snow thanks to a northwesterly flow to the wind. That's kind of your hint. When you see that and we get into this time of year, lake effect snow definitely possible. And that's what's prompting those snow squall watches and warnings from Kitchener up towards Owen Sound and then through Perry Sound and Elliott Lake. Into this evening, though, it is dry. We don't hold on to much in the way of any active weather. We get into our Friday, it just kind of escapes us here in the GTA for the most part, but anywhere, again, along those eastern shorelines of Lake Huron and Georgian Bay, you're getting some snow. As we head in towards our Friday, we look through to the weekend, it starts to get a little bit closer to the GTA, but again, these are just those streamers coming off of Lake Huron and Georgian Bay thanks to that wind. And as we head into Sunday is our best chance in the city for seeing a dusting. You won't need the shovel, but it is going to start to get a little bit cooler, so factor that into your plans. If you want to maybe get to those outdoor rinks, you're going to need a couple of those layers. Pretty seasonal as we head in towards the end of the week. Your Saturday, Sunday, by no means is it going to be a whiteout when it comes to the snow, but temperature-wise, it gets a little cooler. But hey, December begins on Sunday. It's time of year for it. Michelle, Sean?
Time is flying. Thank you, Jess. Well, there are millions who call Toronto home, including a sizable pigeon population.
But they're not always welcome. CTV's Scott Lightfoot shows us how the city's trying to control them so visitors will continue to flock to public places.
Like the sign and the sightseers, pigeons are a constant presence in Nathan Phillips Square.
I think they're more of a nuisance to people. There are a lot of them.
On the ground, the arches, even the benches, there aren't too many spots that you can't spot a pigeon and what they leave behind.
The excrement can be an issue. Depending on how many birds there are, it can pile up.
In an effort to curb the pigeon population, the city has been providing the birds with contraceptive-laced feed at a number of rooftop sites since the spring of last year. And now they're taking their pigeon birth control program to the ground. with a new feeder in front of the square.
At sunrise, it's on a timer, so sunrise every day, the food will be dispersed and the birds will come and eat it and then won't have any viable eggs.
A field camera attached will help officials do a rough count of the number of feeding birds each day. Similar feeders have been used in Barcelona. That city started its population control program back in 2017, and officials say they've seen a yearly decrease of 20 to 30%. Officials here hope to reduce Toronto's pigeon population by half within a few years.
It's not great for these birds to be out in the elements. They don't live a long time, 2 to 3 years. It's a pretty tough life for them. They are domestic animals and that have been abandoned. They're feral.
A lack of natural predators, like this hawk who was hanging out above the newly installed feeder, is one of the reasons Toronto's pigeon population has been able to thrive. But the biggest booster is human intervention. Many people feed the birds, some on a daily basis, despite a bylaw passed last year to prohibit it. Officials here hope by educating people not to feed the pigeons and expanding their contraceptive feed program, they should be able to ground the soaring numbers of pigeons in this city.
They shouldn't then be as much of a nuisance for people.
Scott Lightfoot, CTV News.
Billboard magazine has named Taylor Swift the second greatest pop star of the 21st century. The magazine has been unveiling its ranking in a series of articles. Billboard describes the list as consisting of the artists who have most defined pop stardom for the last 25 years. Many Swifties expressing shock that she wasn't in the top spot. That individual has yet to be revealed. And while getting tickets to Swift shows here may have felt like winning a lottery, a signed guitar from the pop star is currently up for grabs for the lucky winner of an add-on prize for the ongoing 50-50 draw run by the Toronto Blue Jays Jays Care Foundation. Details on how to enter are at jays5050.com.
Following the release of Wicked and Gladiator 2, another franchise is making a big splash at the box office this week. Moana 2 officially hit theaters Wednesday. Deadline reports Disney's animated musical sequel brought in $54 million in Tuesday previews. That would put it on track for $170 million over the 5-day Thanksgiving holiday period south of the border. Box office results like that would easily surpass the previous record holder, Frozen 2.
Classroom behavior in Ontario has worsened. That's according to a new study. We'll have more on the findings after this short break.
Welcome back. Talking over teachers, texting in class, and packing up before a lesson is over. According to a new study, classroom behavior in Ontario has worsened. CTV's Spencer Turcott has more.
Inside Ontario's classrooms, sometimes the most important lessons aren't part of the lesson plan. Social interactions are usually taught by example, but it seems incivility in schools has spiked.
I think that students themselves see that classrooms have definitely changed.
Jeff Pellick is the Waterloo Region President for the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. He says the rise in rude behavior is taking a toll.
And it's not just teachers taking time off because they've been experiencing increases in civility or violence or what have you. It's also teachers actually resigning and leaving the profession. I think we're in a bit of a perfect storm.
And that perfect storm is highlighted through new research at Brock University. After surveying over 300 students aged 9 to 14 and about 100 elementary school teachers in fall 2022, there was a consensus from both sides. There is a lack of respect in the classroom, and it seems pandemic disruptions are still at play.
A couple of years in Ontario anyways of interrupted learning, and they were pretty clear to say that they felt like the online learning did exasperate kind of some of these things.
That can be anything from showing up late to class to talking back to a teacher or even texting during a lesson. Incivility is something 42% of the Ontario teachers surveyed reported.
Some of these low-level behaviors you would do when you were on Zoom and you just wouldn't do in a classroom setting. On your Zoom class, you can talk when the teacher's talking. You can walk out of the room, go get a snack whenever you want.
The Waterloo Region District School Board's Associate Director says at the very least they've seen an improvement in one area.
I would say certainly
this year in particular is with the implementation of the new policy and procedure, reducing the use of cell phones and things in class.
Nearly all teachers, 95%, reported students' socio-emotional skills were lower or much lower than past cohorts. Teaching those skills can be a fine line, something Scott Miller says requires a team effort with families.
So they too can see what we're working on, the kind of social skills that we're working to build, the expectations we have of their children.
And while rude behavior in the classroom spiked in 2022, researchers behind the study say they're not seeing any indication that civility will return to pre-pandemic benchmarks anytime soon. Spencer Turcott, CTV News, Kitchener.
TikTok is rolling out changes that will affect teens who use it. In the coming weeks, the company will begin restricting the use of some appearance effects for users under the age of 18. It comes after concerns were raised by teens and parents in a new study. The restrictions will apply to some effects that alter people's appearance, but may be hard to detect, like beauty filters. However, this will not apply to obvious or funny effects like animal ears.
Still to come, Canadian stocks were pushed towards record territory again today. Details on the rest of your business headlines coming up after the break.
Get Toronto's top stories, breaking news alerts, and watch live. Download the CTV News app.
Strength in pipelines helped push the Canadian stocks into record territory again today.
Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg brings us the latest in business.
Hello there. Here are your business headlines. Toronto's benchmark stock index was in record territory this morning. It was lifted by pipeline giants TC Energy and Enbridge. TC offers a dividend yield of almost 5%, and Enbridge is at about 6%. Those payments have become more attractive as interest rates fall. U.S. regulators have opened a widespread antitrust investigation of Microsoft. Part of the concern surrounds Microsoft's cloud computing business after a string of cybersecurity incidents. 25 years ago, the U.S. government unsuccessfully tried to break the company up. Rivals such as Salesforce and Zoom says Microsoft giving away its Teams video conferencing software in a bundle makes it hard for them to compete. And finally, oil looks set for a second annual decline, but optimists are clinging to positive signals from the fuel and chemical markets. Prices for fuel oil in Asia are at their strongest since 2022, and naphtha used in plastics production is near multi-year highs. That's the latest in business. I'm Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg.
Well, finding the right contractor to complete your home renovation can be a tricky process.
After living through more than a year of work to their home, a Whitby family says there is still plenty to do, and they're concerned about the money they've paid so far. CTV's Pat Foran has this consumer alert.
This home in Whitby has been undergoing renovations for over a year, and work has almost come to a standstill. Premila Lobo and Rajesh Bhatt wanted to expand their kitchen and add an addition with a legal basement apartment.
It's our worst nightmare. We're not going to ever be able to recover from this.
The couple hired a contractor and agreed to a total price for the renovation of $255,000. They became concerned after paying $175,000 when the renovation was more than a year behind schedule.
He promised he would finish the interior by Thanksgiving and then Christmas and so on. And 13 months later, we still don't have the interior done.
With winter on the way, they're also worried about the addition and basement apartment, which is also far from being finished.
Long way to go. Insulation, electrical, then the finishing. So this is supposed to be the kitchen and the family room and the legal addition.
The money they paid to the contractor was supposed to cover the work being done, and they were shocked to find out the trades, which did much of the work so far, said they hadn't been paid.
I have a whole list of unpaid sub-trades, right from the flooring guy to the electrician to drywallers to the foundation company and many more.
They discovered liens were being placed on their home for almost $90,000, and the unpaid trades won another $11,000 for a total of almost $100,000. They signed a contract with Dennis Design Build. CTV News reached out to owner Trevor Dennis. He told us there were issues with the permits, and he still hopes to finish the reno.
At no point have I ever walked away from this project. The job was extremely delayed for reasons that were not mine, and I'm trying to complete it.
While Dennis says he will finish the project, Bott said work isn't getting done.
Absolutely no specifics. He'll just say, I'm going to do it.
They wanted a family room where their daughters could practice their music and hope somehow their renovations will be completed.
If he's not able to do it, to refund the money.
So we can get someone else to give us our home back.
Pat Foran, CTV News.
Turning to sports, the Maple Leafs were looking for a 5th straight win when they faced off with the Florida Panthers last night.
Stick back. Good foot, Marner. Bobrovsky down, scores. Mitch Marner, power play goal. And Nikita Grabenkin with an assist for his first NHL point.
Marner got the Leafs on the board in the second period, but the team ended up losing the game 5-1. Captain Austin Matthews was not in the lineup despite teasing a possible return earlier in the week. The Leafs are back on the ice Saturday to take on the Tampa Bay Lightning.
The Raptors were in action last night against the New Orleans Pelicans.
Shed. Battle another three.
The Raptors took an early lead and were able to build on it. They ended up winning the game 119-93. The victory is the Raptors' first win on the road this season. The team will be back on the court tomorrow to play the Miami Heat.
Coming up, love letters between a wartime couple thought lost have been returned to their owner, all thanks to a young history buff. We'll have the story after this short break.
Well, they were written nearly 80 years ago, and now a Guelph woman is reunited with the letters from her husband, sent just after the Second World War.
The family is thanking a young man from Goderich for bringing them home. CTV's Jeff Pickle reports.
I was born right in Guelph, Ontario.
And what year was that in?
21.
At 103 years old, Carmel King has lived a full life.
Well, he just lived down the street from me. And we got married.
In 1946, Carmel married Alfred King, not long after he returned from fighting in the Second World War.
Yeah, that was right after the war.
The letters sent in 1946 from an army hospital in London, Ontario, lost to history until they were found and returned by a young history buff.
So ever since I was a little kid, I was always collecting little antique things, and like my parents always said, I was an old soul in that sense.
18-year-old Brindley Vogt of Godridge has spent much of his life collecting and researching World War II items.
The story behind it's everything. It tells you about the person, tells you what they went through.
Vogt says he paid $10 on an online auction.
So it was those letters, and then 3 envelopes, a status voting card, and then 2 pictures.
Armed with a return address in Guelph and a few names, Vogt was able to track down the family.
We did some research, and the obituaries of Carmel's sisters came up, and then through that, we were able to basically track down this whole situation.
Carmel and Alfred's only daughter, Judy, helped connect the dots.
It was amazing. I feel like it's a Hallmark moment.
No one is really sure how the letters were lost in the first place.
They were, they were left in a case or something.
She says the family is blown away by Vogt's passion and generosity.
Such a delightful young man and a lovely family, and I was just so amazed that he would take the time to do all that research.
An extraordinary act bringing back memories of a lost loved one.
And amazing in a lot of ways that something as simple as a letter could bring this all about and meet such a lovely family too.
The letters, evidence of an early love.
My dear Carm, I guess you're expecting this letter from me and wondering if I went to the hospital and how long I'm going to be here.
And a family bond that remains intact. Jeff Pickle, CTV News, Guelph.
The art of letter writing.
I know, it seems lost, right? But it's just so much more value when you have it, you know?
Right?
Can you imagine?
If you have nice writing, mine is not great. But it's so sweet.
You need that. It has to be pretty too, right? Yeah.
But it is really sentimental, and it's so cool that they're able to share those stories. And maybe the weather over the next few days, you want to be inside. Write some letters instead of texts, whatever sparks joy for you. The weather won't be the worst, but we are kind of tiptoeing into that time of year where you have to start thinking about your drive and winterizing yourself, your car, and getting ready for that wintry weather. Today we're holding off. We're seeing just a little cloud cover out there, but you can see that snow along those eastern shorelines of Lake Huron and Georgian Bay and that northeastern corner of Lake Ontario. It is in the vicinity, friends. We're sitting at 6 degrees right now here in the city, 4 through Windsor, 2 in Ottawa, and we're in the single digits. That's where we're just sitting now for the next couple of days. It gets a little cooler heading into the weekend. The best chance for us in the GTA and the downtown core to see the flurry activity is likely into the end of our weekend.
Thanks, Jess. And that's CTV's News at Noon. Remember, you can get Toronto's breaking news all day long on CB24 and on our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Jessica Smith and the whole team here, have a pleasant afternoon. I'm Michelle Dubé.
And I'm Sean Leathong. Be sure to join us later for CTV News at 5 and 6.